of all the works that you've done, the
Mm.
RPG works that you've written, what's the one you're most proud of?
See, that's tough. It's kind of there's kind of like I'm going to give four things here. I'm really pleased that I was given the opportunity to go back and expand Bard's Gate and City of Brass from their third edition roots to really fill them in. We had a lot of pressure at the time from our publishing partner to, get these manuscripts done, get them turned over, get them turned in, stop now. I always felt that Bard's Gate needed a kind of not really an adventure path, but just a series of adventures for certain levels of characters, things they can do to get them interacted and involved and give them ownership with the setting. And how it's tied in with Absathor and Rappanathic automatically gives it such a great in the Stoneheart Valley product that we put out, which is kind of a combination of a bunch of those books, mostly Tomb of Absathor and all of the extra things that came with Crucible of Freya. It ties in with those so well, but it's I wanted to give it that home base feel where it had its own unique stuff. So I'm proud of how that turned out the second time, and I got to say, it is constantly in development. Italians, Kaizoku Press licensed it from us, released it in Italy. It's gotten rave reviews there. They took and expanded all of the NPCs and gave them all a stat block, like every single NPC. So I think we've recently released that as like a product, so you can get all the NPCs from there in that. So, like I said, yeah, am I proud of that? Yeah, because I was very inexperienced at the time, and a lot of people who were working on that project quit in the middle of it. Same thing with City of Brass. It started out with like a team of five or six people and ended up basically being me and Scott Green with the first one. And yeah, so it was a lot. It was a lot to take and distill that down and keep what was important and keep what wasn't. Having played City of Brass all the way through twice, once with the 3.5 edition, then again with 5e while I was finishing up the campaign for that, expanding it and whatnot. A lot of the things that happened in our third edition adventure found their way into the fifth edition version of the book because it was just so cool the way the players approached things. I wanted to the guy who was Ard, he named himself after the Ard, leader of the people from heavy metal. That's my Lochnar, that guy, right? But he pulls me aside and he's like, "Hey, I want you to know this." And I'm like, "Okay." This is like one of our very first sessions. He goes, "Not me, but my character. My character worships the devil. So whenever we're not in campaign, he's going to the market to purchase sacrifices to the devil." And I'm like, what? I was like, here's a guy who grew up during the Satanic Panic clearly and was like totally rebelled the other way. So he's like, and I am going to betray the entire party at a critical moment in this campaign. And I said,
Wow.
okay. I'm like, and here's, and I'm like, and I could never understand these guys that like want to play these real super evil characters. I mean, I get the greedy evil, right? Because let's be honest, a lot of our named spell wizards and named magic item characters from the AD&D era, they ended up evil. They didn't necessarily start out that way, but they ended up that way
They weren't
because
good people.
they were greedy. They were greedy over magic items. They would like basically if they could push one of the other characters aside to get to that magic item, and that's where that whole joke about the head of Vecna comes from. It's all about how greedy that particular crew of original players were when it came to finding and exploring and experimenting with new artifacts and magic items. Anyways, yeah, I like to play the good guys, but I write the bad guys. Proud of. I'm really happy with how the fungus god from outer space, how the Encephalon Gorgers on the moon, that's kind of a little mini saga that I'm working on. I've got another module that I'm going to write for that. I've got the outline done. Maps have become my Achilles heel. I used to love drawing them when I was a kid, and now it's just like, when you're designing a game, you got to know how many rooms that you're going to need. You got to know how many. It's kind of like the Michael Moorcock design of write a novel in a weekend kind of deal. It's the how many combat encounters versus how many things. How important is it to know what these NPCs are about and their machinations and their ideas? And I like to give all of that stuff to the game masters so they can decide how that best works for the players that they have because their players are ultimately what their story is all about, where they should be. Your character's experiences. I'm not a big guy about like write a 1,000-page backstory before you come to my table. I want to give your character the experience of living their life from the start. Because to me, that's always been a richer thing.
Hmm.
But yeah, the Encephalon Gorger's Fungus God, I don't know. I don't want to call it a trilogy because it might end up being three, four, 5 books before I'm all said and done. But that vibe is I'm really pleased with that because I put a lot of thought into what makes it a great game, what makes a good adventure, what's going to give people satisfaction at the table, and what's going to give that guy who spent the money on this book the most bang for the buck. I want it to be fun. I want it to be playable. I've worked with people in the past throughout this. They call it an industry, which makes me chuckle, and I won't get into all of that. But in the RPG business, I've had people who are very well known and very well respected tell me to my face, not anyone I currently work with, just so they know, uh, that they literally, and I quote, I don't give a shit if they play my book at all. As long as they bought it, that's all I care about.
Yeah, I
And
guess some people got to manage their
And
expectations
I just
because
take
some
that
wind
like a
up there.
slap in the face as a gamer. Why, as a
Yeah.
gamer, as someone who's been playing since I was like 6 or 7 years old on the neighbor's porch, right? You know, it's like because my
Yeah.
mom wanted to be able to stick her head out and make sure everything was cool, you know. But yeah, you
That's
know,
some stuff.
yeah, I
But
just can't get behind that philosophy. I want
speaking
it to
of
play. I
Fungus
want it to be
God,
fun.
I'd heard you talking about that on Rolling Bones and I checked it out. And that's such a cool concept. And I
Yeah,
had such a fun time reading it that when I saw that there's other adventures connected to it, I'm like, okay, well, I guess I got to go read these
yeah,
then too. Because the different type of adventure that's happening here, the stakes of what's
mhm.
happening here, I haven't seen done a lot. And this is a very interesting kaiju kind of way of doing it. And I'm like, yes, this is where has this been my whole life?
Yeah,
Because
yeah, yeah,
the only other gaming product I remember seeing like kaiju actually featured in was the original Oriental Adventures, where they had stat blocks for them.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So
Uh,
this was it fed that sweet tooth, and I've been a big fan of Godzilla and all those other movies
yeah.
for
I
decades.
put a kaiju-esque kind of creature, more of a Kong type creature, and it hasn't been reprinted and hasn't been republished, and I don't know if it ever will. But the original printing, third edition of Dead Man's Chest had the island of Bonjo Tombo, where I kind of like the whole Kong Skull Island, and I kind of like one of the first books we read together on a trip when I was a kid was Treasure Island. So I was like Treasure Island, but with King Kong, pirate ship. Why
Yeah.
not? You know, and then relics that you can trick out your boat because my boss is the same way. We're big fans of putting people on boats and sending them out to sea to go find the dungeon that they're supposed to get to. Because that was fun in Ultima, and by golly, it's fun in every RPG I've ever played. But
It
man,
is.
getting people to get on the boat in the first place, you better have a really good adventure, and you better have some really good technique for making it interesting. You know. But
Well,
yeah, you put them on a boat and they're like, I'm in full plate. If I hit the water, I'm gonna die. And it's like, I know, fun, right? Yeah, yeah.
they are. And the City of Brass, I got the fifth edition hardback of that.
Yeah,
And it's 500 plus pages
yeah,
of
yeah. It's
content, and
like a half a
it's
million words. Yeah.
that also I'm impressed by the scale of what it is because in that, just to give a little bit away, there is a interplanar invasion and attempted
Mhm.
takeover
Absolutely.
happening.
Absolutely.
And in Dungeons and Dragons mythology, and it's gotten, I think, more prevalent as the editions have gone on, there's always a threat of the abyss trying to do that, or
Mhm.
some thought about the mind flayers doing it. But I haven't seen it on screen much. But this adventure puts it on screen and gives you a really cool villain.
Oh
And
yeah.
you're when you start, you're already behind. Like you've got
Yeah,
to catch up.
he's already about halfway done. Yeah.
Yeah.
By the time you get going, he's like halfway done. And I mentioned this too, but it was one of the guys I met at North Texas, and he was, I was trying to get a pickle because I had been getting muscle cramps while I was there, probably some medication or something like
Yeah.
that. So I'm at the bar trying to get a pickle, and this guy's eating his dinner and having a drink, and he looks at my name tag and he goes, "Your name looks familiar. What did you write?" And I tell him, and he's like, "Oh man," and he starts going on about City of Brass, and so I laid it out for him. I was like, basically, my influences for City of Brass is Flash Gordon, because now, mind you, I also did like a year worth of research on pre-Islamic mythology, and I interviewed people from throughout the Middle East through the course of it because I'm like, listen, I don't want to offend your culture and your traditions. Do you know about this story? And they're like, oh yeah, yeah, yeah. We tell those stories to kids. It's all good, you know. But they have their own versions of it because the English version is pretty much about 50% made up. The author of the traditional English version of the Arabian Nights was he heard some of those stories and then he went and wrote a novel loosely based on them. So I mean that's a thing. So I asked them, and I got some insight on like their beliefs in genies and the nature of that. And they said, there's people in Iceland and Ireland who believe in leprechauns and house elves and all this kind of stuff. It's no different than that. But Flash Gordon, save the world, Flash, save your planet, right?
That's such a
Uh,
good movie. For folks out there who haven't seen it, treat yourself. Do it.
Yeah, yeah. And
Experience it.
Max von Sydow's version of Ming the Merciless is a
Oh,
perfect way to play your Sultan of Brass is just like, he's like, Clytus, on board, pick a planet for me to pick apart. And then he's going to take the parts of that he likes and throw it into the plane of molten skies and expand his empire and build his godhood through sacrifices. So he's not technically a god, but he is a great power.
you
But
don't want to
he
cross him.
and he wants to be a greater God because then he's going to have infinite power. Then he can set the whole universe on fire if he feels like. So that's the
Yeah.
stakes you're at. And I love that high level stakes, high level play. The only way to beat him is to make friends and actually interact with the characters in the adventure. I don't tell you who you have to because that'd be a railroad. But I tell you, if you're going to play that campaign, you better be friends with somebody because it's going to be real hard, real fast. And then just kind of throwing in all of the different styles of things that I like. Scott Green and I spitball a lot of ideas with the original one. And then I just was like, some of these locations we created, I want to have a whole dungeon of it. I want to have the whole dungeon of it written up because we never did it before. So I got to go back and expand those locations. The Freeman's Tower, awesome. Drug dealing dark elves, you know, and yet they're good friends with the Sultan because, that's the whole dark elf thing. And I wrote it in a timeline where they don't really mess with the spider goddess because I assumed she'd been taken out in the 70s like my party did.
Yeah. You because you
Her,
could
her,
do
her
that.
early 80s.
Yeah.
Well, you can try.
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't going to be easy,
Yeah,
but you
no,
come from
no,
the school
no.
of gaming where
Yeah.
it's not going to be easy, but if you pull it
Yeah.
off, feather
Yeah.
in your
I,
cap, like you
I'm going to
said.
mention my old buddy Joel. He passed about 2 years ago, but when we were kids, he got the backstab on Lowell with the black razor. So, he didn't kill her. He rolled bad, but he knocked her down from 66 to about 5 hit points, and then she killed him. He remembered that the last time I talked to him was about 3, 4 years ago. He's like, "Hey, remember that time I backstabbed Loth?" I'm like, "Who could forget?" He goes, remember when she smashed me against the ceiling of the room and just drug me along like a bug on the bottom of a shoe? I was like, yeah, I remember that too. But yeah,
Somet-
good times, good times. So I'm
Sometimes
going
an
from
awesome death is worth the story,
oh
right?
yeah, it's
Yeah.
the stories, Like when we were talking about that character Ard, who was based on a player in my game, and he did betray the party at the very end and tried to take them out. But by then, one of our clerics was so powerful, he was basically indestructible. So somebody would die, and then the cleric would resurrect them, and someone else would die, and the cleric would raise dead them, and so on and so forth. So people are dropping and getting raised and dropping and getting raised, and the Sultan is raising his guys and they're getting dropped
Ah,
again. They're all casting things like implode and imprisonment and all of this stuff. It was just the craziest high level battle ever. When we did the third edition one, I had like 7 books open and 3 computers,
good
and
God.
it took us 2 game sessions to get all the way through. So
Now,